Born a Crime explores Trevor Noah's childhood and early adulthood, deeply shaped by the impacts of apartheid in South Africa. Noah characterizes apartheid as a systematic and intentional form of government-mandated segregation and racism. The effects of this entrenched system continue to be felt even after apartheid's official end. Although apartheid was formalized in 1948, its origins trace back to South Africa's colonial past. The Dutch East India Company established the Dutch Cape Colony in 1652, and the British Empire seized control in the early 1800s. During this time, European colonizers displaced indigenous peoples, enslaved Africans, and enforced past laws on indigenous individuals to prove they weren't enslaved. Following the 1833 Slavery Abolition Act, British colonizers implemented indentured servitude for the Xhosa people. In 1894, Prime Minister Cecil Rhodes enacted a law that restricted African land ownership, and by 1905, black individuals were stripped of their voting rights. By the early 20th century, there was pronounced social and economic disparity between white individuals and other racial groups, with white people holding total political power. The socio-economic landscape shifted significantly during World War II, as many black individuals migrated to urban areas for work due to labor shortages. This influx led to a strain on social services and housing, causing overcrowding and increased crime rates. In response to their demands for rights and reform, white populations, particularly Afrikaners, expressed resentment, fearing for their socio-economic status compared to British descendants. The National Party, representing Afrikaner interests, campaigned for strict racial segregation to remove black individuals from white-designated areas, arguing it would safeguard white jobs and properties. After winning the 1948 election, they implemented apartheid policies that granted white individuals disproportionate political representation, land ownership, and access to superior public services and education. The Population Registration Act of 1950 categorized people into four racial groups: white, black, colored, like Noah, and Indian, descendants of immigrants from British India. Those with mixed racial backgrounds often faced family separations, a theme Noah recounts in Born a Crime. Black South Africans were further divided into 10 major ethnic groups, including Zulu and Xhosa, with apartheid fostering divisions to weaken resistance among them. Noah highlights these tensions, particularly the challenges posed by language barriers. The Group Areas Act of 1950 enforced racial segregation in residential areas, resulting in the forced removal of many from their homes. Noah shares experiences from Soweto, a designated area for black South Africans where his maternal family was relocated, with tens of thousands being displaced from Johannesburg in the 1950s. The title of Noah's autobiography references apartheid laws against interracial marriage and sexual relations. The Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act of 1949 banned unions between white individuals and those of other races, while the Immorality Amendment Act of 1950 extended this ban to sexual relations. Noah was born in 1984, just a year before these laws were repealed in 1985, meaning his parents risked prosecution by having him. Several factors contributed to the collapse of apartheid in the early 1990s. The economy faltered as the segregated system could not adapt to the demands of a capitalist industrial model, and black individuals had limited purchasing power. International opposition to apartheid grew, spurred by protests, and South African leaders feared the Soviet Union might attract black citizens to communism. Domestic anti-apartheid activism led to the restoration of voting rights first for colored people and Indians, followed by black individuals. Past laws were abolished, and property rights for black citizens were expanded. Between 1990 and 1993, the National Party entered negotiations with the African National Congress, led by Nelson Mandela, who had been imprisoned for 27 years. In 1994, South Africa held its first fully representative general election, resulting in the ANC's victory and Mandela's election as president. Before Chapter 1 begins, Trevor Noah provides a concise overview of apartheid in South Africa. The brilliance of apartheid lay in its ability to persuade the vast majority to turn against one another. It was a system of hate, dividing people into groups and inciting animosity so they could be easily controlled. During apartheid, Black South Africans outnumbered whites by 5 to 1, yet they were fractured into tribes that frequently clashed. White South Africans exploited this division by granting different tribes varying levels of rights and privileges to keep them at odds and maintain control. The most significant rift was between the Zulu and the Xhosa. The Zulu were seen as warriors, while the Xhosa were viewed as intellectuals. The Zulu fought the white man, while the Xhosa strategized with him. Instead of uniting against a common adversary, these groups often blamed each other for issues neither had caused. In the opening of Chapter 1, Noah recounts an incident from when he was 9, in which his mother threw him from a moving car. This happened on a Sunday as they were returning from church. Noah describes his mother as devoutly religious, noting that Black South Africans, like many indigenous peoples globally, adopted the religion of their colonizers. His entire family identifies as Christian, but his grandmother also practices Xhosa ancestral worship. Noah's childhood involved attending church multiple times a week, at least 4 nights. Tuesdays were for prayer meetings, Wednesdays for Bible study, Thursdays for youth services, with Sundays reserved for church, which involved visiting 3 different congregations, a lively mixed church, an analytical white church, and a cathartic black church. He enjoys the music at the mixed church, appreciates Sunday school at the white church, and finds the black church captivating for its dramatic exorcisms. Visiting all 3 churches each Sunday occupies the entire day due to their distance from each other. On the Sunday Noah is thrown from the car, his mother's VW won't start, forcing them to take a minibus. Despite Noah's protests about staying home, his mother is resolute in her plans. At this time, Noah attends a private Catholic school, Maryvale College, and excels in sports, which he attributes to the dynamic between him and his mother. She's a strict disciplinarian, while he is mischievous and often dodges her punishments. Noah remembers being nearly 6 when Nelson Mandela was released from prison, marking a significant turning point in the end of apartheid but also unleashing a wave of violence. He reflects that with apartheid's end, it became clear that black leadership would emerge, but the question was, which leader would take charge? This period was dubbed the Bloodless Revolution, but it referred only to the absence of white casualties. Black blood ran in the streets. Instead of coming together, Black South Africans turned on one another in brutal conflicts, leading to massive riots and horrific violence. Noah lived in Eden Park, close to the turmoil, yet his mother remained unfazed, continuing her church attendance and work, grounded in her faith. On the fateful Sunday, after leaving the white church in a wealthy neighborhood, they waited for a minibus, an informal transit option for black people. When a minibus didn't arrive, they attempted to hitchhike. However, an angry minibus driver, thinking a good Samaritan was trying to take his fare, confronted them. Noah and his mother boarded the minibus to avoid trouble, but the driver, who harbored prejudice against her as a Xhosa woman, used a slur against her and drove off recklessly. Fearing for their safety, she instructed Noah to jump from the bus when it slowed down, which they ultimately did. Before Chapter 2 begins, Trevor Noah provides a brief overview of the development of apartheid in South Africa. He describes apartheid as perfect racism, a system that took centuries to establish, dating back to 1652 when the Dutch arrived in Cape Town and set up a trading colony. To enforce white dominance, Dutch colonists engaged in warfare against the indigenous populations and created laws to oppress and enslave them. These early settlers evolved into a distinct group known as the Afrikaners, referred to as the white tribe of Africa. Due to the significant population of black South Africans, the government recognized the need for more effective methods to maintain control. They studied various forms of institutionalized racism globally, learning from successes and failures, which enabled them to create a highly sophisticated system of racial oppression. Noah describes apartheid as a police state characterized by surveillance and laws intended to keep black people completely controlled. Chapter 2 opens with Noah reflecting on his upbringing during apartheid. He was raised in a mixed-race family, with his black mother, Patricia Nambayisilo Noah, and his white father, Robert, who is of Swiss/German descent. During apartheid, interracial relationships were considered one of the gravest offenses, as they challenged the very foundations of the racist system. Unlike in America, where someone with even a trace of black ancestry is classified as black, mixed-race individuals in South Africa were labeled colored. Under apartheid, all racial groups, colored, black, white, and Indian, were required to register their race with the government, leading to forced relocations and segregation based on these classifications. Those who defied these rules faced severe penalties, including imprisonment for up to 5 years. While many black women of that era worked as factory workers or maids, Patricia pursued a typing class and secured a secretarial position at ICI, a multinational pharmaceutical company. Noah notes that this opportunity arose during the 1980s, a time when the South African government began to hire token black employees in an attempt to alleviate international outrage over apartheid's human rights abuses. He explains that the ultimate aim of apartheid was to make South Africa a predominantly white nation, stripping black people of their citizenship and relocating them to designated homelands. Initially, Patricia lived in Soweto, the township where Noah's family had been relocated. Unhappy there, she began to stay in town, sleeping in public restrooms until she learned how to navigate the city. By wearing maids' uniforms, she blended in and eventually found a flat to rent in Hillbrow, an area known for its vibrant, cosmopolitan atmosphere. Hillbrow was filled with artists, theaters, and nightclubs, and was a rare space where different races mingled freely, albeit discreetly. At 24, Patricia met 46-year-old Robert in Hillbrow. Despite their contrasting personalities, her being wild and free while he was reserved, they connected. They began to frequent nightclubs together, and eventually, Patricia expressed her desire to have a child. Although Robert initially hesitated, he ultimately agreed to her proposal. She would have his child, and he would not be involved in its upbringing. 9 months later, Noah was born. Due to the illegality of interracial relationships, Robert was not listed on Noah's birth certificate, and Patricia told the hospital staff that Noah's father was a light-skinned black man from Swaziland. Despite the legal restrictions, Robert wanted to be part of Noah's life, and Patricia took him to visit Noah regularly, albeit secretly. When Patricia took Noah to visit her family in Soweto, he was not allowed outside for fear that authorities would take him away, as he was considered colored in an all-black area. Before Chapter 3 begins, Trevor Noah discusses the religious landscape of South Africa. South Africa represents a blend of ancient and modern influences, and its Christianity exemplifies this mix. While people adopted the religion of their colonizers, many also clung to ancestral traditions, maintaining these beliefs as a precaution. In South Africa, faith in the Holy Trinity coexists with beliefs in witchcraft, spells, and curses. Chapter 3 starts with Noah reflecting on the gender dynamics of his upbringing. I grew up in a world run by women. My father was loving and devoted, but I could only see him when and where apartheid allowed. The only male presence he encountered regularly was his maternal grandfather, Temperance Noah, who was boisterous and charismatic. Initially seen as eccentric, his family later learns he is bipolar. His grandmother, Frances Noah, serves as the matriarch, managing the household and caring for the children. His great-grandmother, Coco, who is blind, also lives with them. Noah explains his father's absence, noting, apartheid kept me away from my father because he was white, but for most of the kids I knew on my grandmother's block, apartheid had taken away their fathers too, for different reasons. Many men in the community were either working in mines or fighting in exile, leaving the women to handle household responsibilities. Religion became a substitute for the absent fathers, a sentiment reflected in Patricia's assertion that God is her husband. In Soweto, prayer meetings are held nearly every night, rotating among homes. These gatherings involve singing and prayers that often extend late into the night. When the meeting is at his grandmother's house, Noah is chosen to lead the prayers because he speaks fluent English, which he believes results in quicker answers to prayers, reflecting the perception that white people's needs are prioritized. Noah expresses his affection for Soweto, where 1 million residents live without bars, restaurants, or paved roads, yet they find ways to create their own community. Informal grocery stores called spaza shops and backyard bars known as shebeens emerge in the area. Each family is allocated a piece of land by the government, on which they build what they can afford. Initially, these homes may be shanties, but over time, residents upgrade them with bricks and add rooms and windows to create stable homes. Despite having individual houses, everyone shares public bathrooms, which Noah describes as foul-smelling and plagued by flies. As a child, rather than venture outside, he opts to relieve himself on a newspaper. Thinking he's gotten away with it, he is soon discovered when his blind great-grandmother detects an unpleasant odor. He disposes of the newspaper, but when his grandmother and mother return home, they find it. Instead of admitting to his actions, Noah denies it, leading his family to believe that a demon has caused the mess. They then gather the neighborhood to burn the newspaper in an attempt to ward off evil spirits. Before Chapter 4 begins, Trevor Noah discusses the significance of language. Language brings with it an identity and a culture, or at least the perception of it. A shared language says we're the same. A language barrier says we're different. The architects of apartheid understood this. During apartheid, the government mandated that schools teach children in their native languages rather than a common tongue. This approach reinforced the idea of difference among black South Africans, contributing to conflict and division. However, Noah also notes that language can foster unity. If the person who doesn't look like you speaks like you, your brain short-circuits because your racism program has none of those instructions in the code. Chapter 4 opens with Noah reminiscing about an afternoon spent playing doctor with his cousins at his grandmother's house. While examining one cousin's ear, he accidentally punctures the eardrum, causing blood to spray everywhere. After ensuring his cousin is okay, Noah's grandmother punishes his cousin but not Noah. That night, she tells Noah's mother that she cannot discipline Noah because he's white and she doesn't know how to hit a white child. This is not the only instance of Noah receiving preferential treatment for his light skin. His grandfather allows him to ride in the back of the car and refers to him as Master, almost like a chauffeur. His cousins frequently get into trouble, but Noah rarely faces consequences, with his only fear being his strict mother. Noah reflects on how his mixed ethnicity set him apart. Nearly 1 million people lived in Soweto. 99.9% of them were black, and then there was me. I was famous in my neighborhood just because of the color of my skin. He feels like an outsider, regardless of the skin color of those around him, and concludes that the quickest way to bridge the race gap was through language. Like his mother, he learned several South African languages, which enables him to navigate different social situations. He describes his adaptability in this challenging environment. I became a chameleon. My color didn't change, but I could change your perception of my color. When apartheid ends, private schools in South Africa become accessible to all races, and Noah attends a private Catholic school. Despite the desegregation, children still tend to cluster by race on the playground. It is here that Noah first realizes he identifies as black. Before Chapter 5 begins, Trevor Noah outlines the South African education system. Prior to apartheid, many black South Africans received their education from European missionaries, who aimed to Christianize and Westernize the local population. These missionary schools offered subjects like English, medicine, and law, providing valuable knowledge. However, with the onset of apartheid, the government established Bantu schools designed to cripple the black mind. These schools taught only basic subjects, such as counting and road maintenance, while omitting essential topics like science and history. Noah highlights the stark contrast between the British and Afrikaner approaches to education. The British offered something aspirational. By adopting English language and customs, black South Africans might hope for acceptance in society. In contrast, Afrikaners viewed black South Africans as less than human. Chapter 5 opens with Noah's mother, Patricia, sharing, "I chose to have you because I wanted something to love and something that would love me unconditionally in return." Growing up, Patricia felt out of place and experienced hardship. Her parents had a tumultuous marriage, and after their separation, she longed to live with her father but was instead sent to stay with an aunt in the homelands. There, she worked on a farm with little food and faced a challenging upbringing. A pivotal moment came when she met a white pastor who taught her English. At 21, she secured a good job and moved back in with her family, but soon left to escape the pressures of her household. Patricia is determined that Noah will have a better life than hers. She teaches him English and frequently reads to him, making books a cherished part of his childhood. For much of their early life together, it is just Noah and his mother, and she enriches his experiences by taking him to parks, driving him through the city, and even allowing him to drive their car. My mother took me places black people never went. She refused to be bound by ridiculous ideas of what black people couldn't or shouldn't do. Before Chapter 6 begins, Trevor Noah highlights the contradictions inherent in apartheid, noting that it had fatal flaws baked in, particularly its nonsensical classifications. For instance, Chinese individuals were classified as black South Africans, while Japanese individuals were categorized as white, driven by the government's desire to maintain favorable trade relations with Japan. Chapter 6 opens with Noah recalling his mother's frustration, saying, "I gave birth to the most selfish piece of shit on earth, and all it ever did was cry and eat and shit and say, me, 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 me." He acknowledges his selfishness as a child, characterized by a voracious appetite and a love for playing with fire. He compares his relationship with his mother to a cat-and-mouse dynamic. "My relationship with my mom was like the relationship between a cop and a criminal in the movies, the relentless detective and the devious mastermind she's determined to catch. They're bitter rivals, but, damn, they respect the hell out of each other." As he matures, instead of arguing verbally, they begin writing down their disagreements, each trying to outsmart the other. At the age of 7, Noah's mother starts dating a man named Abel, who lives in a garage owned by a white family. One day, while playing with the son of the family's black servant, Noah teaches him to create fire using a magnifying glass. When he accidentally leaves it unattended, it causes a fire that destroys the servant quarters and the main house. Surprisingly, Noah faces no consequences for the incident, but his family starts calling him Terror, viewing him as a troublesome and destructive child. Before Chapter 7 begins, Trevor Noah reflects on cultural superstitions, noting, "I grew up in a black family in a black country. And in all the time I've yet to find a place where black people like cats." He explains that in South African culture, cats are often associated with witchcraft, leading many black people to prefer dogs instead. Chapter 7 opens with Noah's mother surprising the family by bringing home 2 beautiful black cats. In their predominantly black neighborhood, owning a cat, especially a black one, would be seen as a declaration of witchcraft, but his mother believes it's acceptable in their colored neighborhood. However, one evening, they come home to a shocking sight. The cats have been skinned and hung by their tails on the front gate. This leads Noah to conclude that colored people, apparently, were no more progressive than black people on the issue of cats. Later, his mother adopts 2 puppies, Maltese/Bull Terrier mixes. She names her puppy Pink Panther, while Noah names his Fifi. Initially, they think Fifi is just silly, but it turns out she is deaf, which explains her antics. One day, while home for the holidays, Noah follows Fifi as she jumps over their 5-foot fence, only to discover she's been living a double life with another family. The other family insists that Fifi belongs to them, and they refuse to return her until Noah's mother offers them 100 rand. Noah reflects on the emotional impact of losing Fifi. "Fifi was my first heartbreak. No one has ever betrayed me more than Fifi. It was a valuable lesson to me. The hard thing was understanding that Fifi wasn't cheating on me with another boy. She was merely living her life to the fullest." Before Chapter 8 begins, Patricia encourages Noah to seek out his father, emphasizing the importance of knowing one another. "It's not about knowing who you are. It's about him knowing who you are, and you knowing who he is." She reflects on how many men grow up without their fathers, leading to misconceptions about fatherhood. At the beginning of Chapter 8, Noah describes his father as a mystery. "My father is a complete mystery. There are so many questions about his life that I still cannot even begin to answer." He shares that he has never met his father's parents and has recently learned about an older sister. Despite the limited knowledge, he describes his father as very Swiss, clean, and particular and precise, and notes his strong opposition to racism and homogeneity. His father's stance isn't rooted in self-righteousness, rather, he struggles to comprehend how white people could be racist in a place like South Africa. This belief led him to defy apartheid laws and even open the first integrated restaurant in Johannesburg. Noah and his father maintain a relationship until Noah turns 13, when his father moves to Cape Town. Although Noah misses him, life moves quickly, and by his early 20s, he's finding success as a comedian. He often wonders if his father thinks about him. At 24, he decides to track him down. After contacting the Swiss embassy, he receives a letter from his father and arranges to visit him in Cape Town. He recalls the day vividly. "I'll never forget that day. It was probably one of the weirdest days of my life, going to meet a person I knew yet did not know at all." Despite the time apart, they reconnect effortlessly. Before Chapter 9 begins, Noah reflects on the complexities of identity among colored people, describing them as a hybrid group with diverse features. Some are light and some are dark. Some have Asian features, some have white features, some have black features. He points out the curse of their undefined heritage, explaining that colored people often lack a clear lineage to trace back. Their backgrounds blend into a mix of white and native influences, with many speaking Afrikaans rather than African languages. He contrasts this with black people, who have a more defined sense of identity. Chapter 9 opens with Noah reminiscing about a giant mulberry tree in Eden Park, a neighborhood for colored people. While the kids play and eat mulberries together, Noah feels like an outsider because he identifies as black. He notes that this feeling of alienation was common under apartheid, as colored people were used to create confusion and division within society. The state's categorization led to colored individuals striving for acceptance as almost whites, which further complicated their identities. One day, while gathering mulberries, a group of boys starts throwing the fruit at Noah. Although it doesn't hurt physically, the experience frightens him. He rushes home to tell Abel, despite his mother's attempts to dissuade him. Abel insists on confronting the boys and begins to beat the ringleader. Initially, Noah feels a sense of vindication, but he soon realizes that Abel's anger is misdirected and disproportionate. As he looks into the eyes of the boy being beaten, he empathizes with him. "I realized how much he and I had in common. He was a kid. I was a kid. He was crying. I was crying." In that moment, Noah understands that the boy is also a victim of the societal pressures and hatred that have shaped their lives. Before Chapter 10 begins, Noah reflects on how his mother focused on teaching him about adulthood and relationships, often discussing complex topics like sex without considering his youth. He shares her advice, emphasizing the importance of understanding a woman's mind before physical intimacy. In Chapter 10, Noah recounts transferring to H.A. Jack Primary School at age 12, where he experiences his first Valentine's Day. Unfamiliar with the tradition, he learns from his friends that he needs to ask a girl to be his Valentine. They encourage him to approach Maylene, the only other colored student. Under the iconic McDonald's arch, he nervously asks her, and she agrees, sharing a kiss. On Valentine's Day, Noah arrives at school with flowers, a teddy bear, and a card for Maylene, excited to celebrate their newfound connection. However, she quickly informs him that she can no longer be his Valentine because she has chosen to be with Leonardo, a popular white boy. Noah feels devastated but acknowledges the social dynamics at play, recognizing that, given the choice, he would likely have picked Leonardo as well. Before Chapter 11 begins, Noah humorously describes his family's financial struggles, highlighting his mother's resourcefulness with their car's petrol usage. He shares a vivid memory of her making him push the car inch by inch during traffic jams to save fuel, demonstrating their challenging economic situation. Chapter 11 opens with Noah starting 8th grade at Sandringham High School, a diverse, Model C school that attracts students from various backgrounds. Despite the variety, Noah still feels out of place, caught between groups. He's not fully accepted by the Indian or Chinese students, and the colored kids often mock him for being too black. In South Africa, there are no cafeterias. Instead, students buy food from a tuck shop and eat wherever they like. The lines for food are long, leaving little time to eat. To fit in and earn some money, Noah becomes the tuck shop guy, taking orders from classmates and racing to the front of the line to buy their food. He cleverly takes a percentage of their purchases, turning his role into a thriving business. Noah describes his success as a tuck shop clerk, noting that his main customers are the overweight, well-off kids who appreciate his service. By catering to them, he not only earns a decent living but also forms friendships that bridge racial divides, making his high school experience more fulfilling despite his earlier feelings of isolation. Before Chapter 12 begins, Noah reflects on the weight of regret, emphasizing that while he doesn't regret his actions, he is troubled by the opportunities he missed and the things he left unsaid. He argues that regret, unlike failure or rejection, is an unanswered question that lingers throughout life. Chapter 12 opens with Noah's candid assessment of his high school years. He describes himself as unattractive, with acne and a lack of stylish clothes. Although he considers himself funny, he realizes that in the social hierarchy, it's the cool guys who attract girls, while the funny ones merely get to hang out with them. Noah forms a close friendship with a girl named Johanna, who shares a similar background, and he develops a crush on her best friend, Zahira. He finds Zahira beautiful, likening her to a colored version of Salma Hayek. Determined to build a strong friendship with her, he strategizes to stay close to Zahira with the hope of asking her to the matric dance when the time comes. However, disaster strikes when Zahira suddenly disappears from school. Noah learns from Johanna that Zahira's family has moved to America, leaving him heartbroken not just by her absence but also by the realization that he missed his chance to express his feelings. This moment encapsulates the themes of regret and lost opportunities that resonate throughout his adolescence. Before Chapter 13 begins, Noah discusses how he ended up living in a predominantly white neighborhood, noting that his mother found a dilapidated house owned by a family that didn't conform to neighborhood standards. This allowed them to integrate into a community otherwise unwelcoming to black families. Noah describes himself as the only black child in a white suburb, emphasizing that he primarily made friends with the children of domestic workers. Chapter 13 opens with Noah reminiscing about his best friend, Teddy, at Sandringham High School. They bond quickly, sharing a mischievous spirit and a sense of camaraderie that makes Noah feel normal for the first time. Teddy's mother works as a domestic worker, and their friendship flourishes as they walk between their homes and school, often spending weekends at the mall, even when they can't afford to buy anything. Their mischief escalates when they discover a way to steal alcohol-filled chocolates from a stationery shop after closing time. However, their fun takes a turn when a security guard catches them one night. Noah manages to escape, but Teddy is apprehended. The following day, Noah finds himself in the principal's office, facing mall security and police officers who are investigating the theft. When they show him a video of the incident, Noah fears he will be recognized. To his shock, the authorities fail to identify him, instead focusing on finding white kids associated with Teddy. Noah realizes that the camera's limitations lead them to misinterpret his identity. While Teddy appears dark, Noah's lighter skin is perceived as white on the black and white footage. Though relieved to avoid trouble, Noah feels a deep sense of anger and invisibility. He reflects on the absurdity of a racial construct that blinds the authorities to his presence, highlighting the complexities and injustices of identity and perception in a racially divided society. Before Chapter 14 begins, Noah reflects on South Africa's linguistic diversity, describing it as a modern-day Tower of Babel. He notes that while the country has 11 official languages, people often struggle to communicate, yet somehow society continues to function, though not always smoothly. At the beginning of Chapter 14, Noah shares how he found entrepreneurial success during high school. His tuck shop business has grown into a mini-empire, supplemented by selling pirated CDs he makes at home, thanks to a computer and CD writer. Life is thriving for him, even as he assumes he won't get a date for the upcoming matric dance. He employs two middlemen, Tim and Sizwe, who help sell his CDs. Tim, a talkative and somewhat deceitful character, promises Noah a date with a beautiful girl if he can get a better cut from their sales. Despite his skepticism about Tim's claims, he is intrigued when Tim introduces him to Babiki, who is indeed stunning. Noah and Babiki spend time together, but she remains quiet. Tim assures Noah that she will go to the dance with him, prompting Noah to change his appearance by relaxing his hair and buying a new outfit. However, when he picks her up for the dance, Babiki is silent and reluctant to leave the car, repeatedly saying no. When Noah's friends arrive, they discover that Babiki doesn't speak English, she speaks Pedi, a language Noah doesn't know. Realizing they can't communicate, he drives her home, where she unexpectedly kisses him goodbye, leaving Noah puzzled and confused. Before chapter 15 begins, Noah mentions that in Germany, every child learns about the Holocaust in depth, including its significance and implications, which fosters a sense of awareness and remorse among Germans. In contrast, he observes that in South Africa, the history of apartheid isn't taught with the same critical approach. Instead of fostering judgment or shame, history is presented as mere facts, lacking emotional and moral context. In chapter 15, Noah introduces Bolo, Bruce Lee, and John, 3 Chinese boys who transferred to his school, Sandringham, during his 9th grade. They were the only Chinese students among 1,000. Noah becomes acquainted with Bolo through their tuck-shop interactions. Bolo and a white boy named Daniel sell pirated CDs, and Noah overhears them venting about black students who take their products without paying. He offers to mediate sales to the black students. After a year of collaboration, Daniel gifts Noah a CD writer worth 2,000 rand, which significantly transforms Noah's life. This gift gave me the means to control the bootleg business entirely. Noah starts copying music from the internet and selling it at school. Sizwe suggests he make mix CDs, which become even more popular. His sales thrive, earning him about 500 rand a week by the time he graduates, a sum that exceeds what many workers in South Africa earn. This newfound financial freedom allows him to indulge, including frequent meals at McDonald's. Grateful for Daniel's gift, Noah recognizes that his success is tied to the support of others. Daniel's act, though small, illustrated how crucial it is to empower those who have been marginalized. He reflects on the advantages Daniel had, noting, "While I had a knack for selling, it would have led nowhere without resources." He argues that the saying, "teach a man to fish," is meaningless if the man lacks a fishing rod. After honing his skills in mixing and burning CDs, Noah begins DJing at street parties in Alexandra, a densely populated, informal settlement known for its vibrant nightlife and high crime rate. He describes street parties as a key feature of Alexandra, where a simple tent can transform the street into a festive gathering. His ability to provide endless music through MP3s makes him a popular DJ, unlike others who are limited by their record collections. As his popularity increases, his events become more elaborate, and he assembles a dance crew, featuring a talented dancer named Hitler. In their community, the best dancer is a symbol of status, attracting attention and admiration. Noah notes that when he DJs and Hitler dances, the crowd cheers enthusiastically, shouting, "Go Hitler!" Noah explains that in South Africa, the name Hitler does not carry the same weight of offense for black South Africans, as there are far more pressing historical traumas. He suggests that if black Africans could alter history, many figures would take precedence over Hitler due to the extent of suffering they've experienced. Noah and his dancers are invited to perform at a cultural event at a school. As Hitler begins to dance, the crowd's reaction shifts to silence and discomfort. Initially, Noah assumes their reaction stems from the suggestive nature of Hitler's performance, only to discover that the audience is Jewish. Before chapter 16, Noah reflects on his black neighborhood, noting that Soweto was beautiful because, after democracy, you watched Soweto grow. In contrast, Alexandra lacks the space to expand or change, it is confined. Noah begins chapter 16 by discussing his friend Sizwe. Although they had been friends throughout high school, Noah had never visited Sizwe's neighborhood, Alexandra. After graduating, Sizwe invites him to explore the area, and Noah, curious, agrees. He observes that Alexandra is organized in a grid pattern with paved streets but mostly dirt sidewalks. The area overwhelms his senses with a mix of smells, yet within the chaos, he detects a social order tied to socioeconomic status, with different blocks housing families and gangsters. Alexandra is inexpensive, with basic meals available for very little, and those with more money can afford extras, such as cheese. Those who can buy cheese are labeled cheese boys, which signifies a certain privilege. You're not really hood because your family has enough money to buy cheese. Sizwe fits this description, and he, like other cheese boys, is impacted by the end of apartheid. Noah explains that cheese boys find themselves in a complicated position after apartheid ends. Unlike those born in poverty, they have seen a world beyond their neighborhood and have had better opportunities due to their family's relative success. However, they still face limitations. After spending time in Alexandra, Noah's outlook shifts. He realizes there is a thin line between civilian life and crime, with varying degrees of criminality based on necessity. He recognizes that criminal activities range from a mother stealing food to survive to gangsters dealing in weapons. In Alexandra, everyone knows each other, and criminals can often be friends. Noah starts selling pirated CDs there, and he and Sizwe begin hustling, making even more money. They leverage their profits to offer short-term loans and participate in a barter economy, buying stolen goods at a lower price and selling them for profit. At the peak of our operation, we probably had around 10,000 rand in capital. Though Noah initially intended to save for college, after 2 years he finds himself without a plan or savings. He notes, the tricky thing about the hood is that you're always working, and you feel like something's happening, but really nothing's happening at all. One night, while DJing in Lombardy East, a nearby affluent neighborhood, the police shut down the party due to noise complaints. As Noah struggles to turn off his music, the police become impatient and shoot his computer monitor, causing him to lose all his music and effectively his business. Later, he comes across a stolen camera that contains family photos, leading him to realize that stealing is not just about the object but also about taking someone's memories and part of their life. While traveling by minibus to a dance competition, the police stop the bus and question them. When they identify themselves as being from Alexandra, the police insult them, accusing them of being criminals. Since Noah and his friends have no money for bribes, they end up in jail. Before Chapter 17, Noah remembers a time he shoplifted batteries because his mother refused to buy them. When the police informed her, she insisted they keep him to teach him a lesson. In Chapter 17, Noah reflects on the tough lessons from his mother, stating, "My mom never gave me an inch. Whenever I got into trouble, it was always tough love, lectures, and punishment." He explains that black parents often discipline their children to prepare them for the harsh realities of life, particularly in environments like Alexandra, which his mother despises for its lack of positive influences. One day, Noah learns about a great clearance sale on mobile phones at a suburban store. He decides to buy one and sell it for a profit in the hood, but since the store is too far to walk, he takes one of Abel's junkyard cars. While driving, he gets pulled over by a police officer and realizes he's more afraid of his parents' reaction than the legal implications. He soon understands the gravity of the situation when the officer suspects he's driving a stolen car. Noah is taken to the police station and has to wait for his bail hearing. Although he manages to get money for a lawyer, he still spends the night in a cell. The conditions are uncomfortable, but what disturbs him more is the company. In the cell, it's hard to tell who are serious criminals and who are there for minor offenses. To protect himself, Noah pretends to be a colored gangster, hoping it will deter others from bothering him. On the third day, a massive man is added to the cell, striking fear in Noah. The guard speaks to him in Zulu, but Noah realizes he speaks Tsonga, a language he knows. Acting as an interpreter, he forms a bond with the man, discovering that, despite his intimidating appearance, he is kind-hearted and turned to petty theft to support his family. Noah reflects on how the justice system is unfairly influenced by factors like skin color, wealth, and legal representation. During his court hearing, Noah is handcuffed and taken in a police van. The holding area is a large pen beneath the courtroom, where he encounters frightening individuals, including a man who threatens him and another in distress. This experience makes him acutely aware of the seriousness of his situation. Ultimately, Noah is granted bail and heads to his mother's house. He lies about where he's been, but she sees through it and confronts him about who paid for his bail and lawyer. She explains that her strictness comes from love, emphasizing, "If I don't punish you, the world will punish you even worse. The world doesn't love you." She insists that her discipline is intended to protect him from harsher realities he might face outside. Before Chapter 18 begins, Noah recalls a memory of eating a whole bowl of custard and jelly, known to Americans as Jell-O, and feeling sick afterward. On top of feeling sick to his stomach that night, his entire body gets bitten by mosquitoes. The next morning, his mom wants them to go to church. He says he doesn't feel well enough to go, but she says that's exactly why they need to go, so that he can be healed. At the beginning of chapter 18, Noah says that once he starts cornrowing his hair for the matric dance, he begins receiving attention from girls. But his mom just makes fun of him, saying that he spends more time on his hair than she does. They joke back and forth about their looks, but he thinks his mom is beautiful on the outside, beautiful on the inside. He regards his mother with esteem. She had a self-confidence about her that I never possessed. Noah only remembers two men ever being in his mom's life, his dad and his stepfather, Abel. Noah initially likes Abel. He's big, charming, and loves to help people. When Noah's mom tells him that she's going to marry Abel, he tells her it's not a good idea. Despite liking him, he tells her, there's just something not right about him. I don't trust him. I don't think he's a good person. A year after Noah's mom and Abel marry, his baby brother, Andrew, is born. After that, they meet Abel's family for the first time. In his family, the women do all the cooking and cleaning while the men relax. Noah's mom doesn't fit in, and she refuses to ever go back. Noah says that for most of his life he lived in a world run by women, but after Abel moves in, he starts asserting himself as the head of the household. He makes them keep their dogs outside, even though they've always been inside dogs, and he tries to limit how much time Noah's mom spends at church. He also doesn't want Noah's mom taking him to see his dad, since it's her ex. After he moves in, Abel begins drinking heavily. He would average a six-pack of beer a night. Noah recalls how his stepfather would be when he drank. His eyes would go red, bloodshot. That was the clue I learned to read. I always thought of Abel as a cobra, calm, perfectly still, then explosive. There was no ranting, no clenched fists. He'd be very quiet, and then out of nowhere the violence would come. His eyes were everything. They were the eyes of the devil. The first time Abel gets violent with Noah's mom, he is drunk and almost burns the house down. She yells at him, and he thinks she's disrespecting him, so he smacks her across the face, twice. She runs to the police station to file a report, but the police don't take her seriously. Noah describes it like a boys' club. The police always take the man's side. Noah, his mom, and Andrew go stay with her family in Soweto for a while, but they move back in with Abel after he apologizes. Abel's boss sells his business, Mighty Mechanics, and Abel buys it with Noah's mom's financial help. Abel is an amazing mechanic but a horrible businessman, and eventually the business is sinking. Noah's mom quits her job and dedicates her time to helping Abel run the shop. The shop ends up consuming so much of their lives that they start staying the night there, and Noah sleeps in the cars. They're even forced to live on mopane worms. Mopane worms are literally the cheapest thing that only the poorest of the poor people eat. They're these spiny, brightly colored caterpillars the size of your finger. They're nothing like escargot, where someone took a snail and gave it a fancy name. They're fucking worms. They have black spines that prick the roof of your mouth as you're eating them. After living in the shop for nearly a year and watching Abel drink away their profits, Noah's mom has had enough. She gets another secretarial job and buys a house in Highlands North. Noah's mom gives him what he calls Old Testament discipline, whereas Abel's beatings were different. In all the time I received beatings from my mom, I was never scared of her. I understood that it was discipline and it was being done for a purpose. The first time Abel hit me I felt something I had never felt before. I felt terror. He is in 6th grade the first time it happens. Noah falsifies his mom's signature and gets caught. This makes Abel angry, and he takes Noah into a small closet, blocking the entrance. Noah is oblivious to what's about to happen because Abel has never shown any violence to him before. In the blink of an eye Abel punches Noah in the ribs. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. I had never been that scared before, ever. Because there was no purpose to it, that's what made it so terrifying. It wasn't discipline. Nothing about it was coming from a place of love. It didn't feel like something that would end with me learning a lesson about forging my mom's signature. It felt like there was something inside him that wanted to destroy me. Noah manages to escape and runs away. Abel initially chases him, but eventually Noah loses him. From that day forward, Noah avoids being alone with Abel. After Abel loses the business and Noah's mom starts making more money than him, that's when they saw the dragon emerge. The drinking got worse. He grew more and more violent. Around this time, he hits Noah's mom again. She again tries to file a police report, and the police again ignore her. Abel also begins kicking Noah's dog, Fufi. Despite being beaten, Fufi always came back to Abel because, not only is Fufi deaf, she also has a condition where she can't feel pain. One afternoon, Noah returns from school to discover that Abel has purchased a gun. Soon after, he decides to move out. A few years later, despite having a separate room from Abel, Noah's mom informs him that she is pregnant again. Noah is furious, struggling to comprehend how this could happen. He had always thought she would leave Abel once Andrew was older, and now she would be tied to him for another 18 years. His mother, who is 44 and had undergone a tubal ligation, is also confused but believes the pregnancy has a purpose. Soon Noah's new baby brother Isaac is born, and shortly afterwards Abel hits Noah's mom with a bicycle. She again tries to file a charge and again the police ignore her. Noah's mom has a small house built behind their normal house, and she moves into it with the children. He asks his mom why she doesn't just leave, and she says because he'll kill them. Eventually Noah's mom leaves Abel and remarries. Noah loses touch with his mom and, years passed. Life carried on. Then one day his little brother Andrew calls to say that their mom has been shot in the head. Immediately Noah knows Abel did it. At the hospital, Andrew tells the story of how they were coming home from church when Abel randomly showed up with a gun. Andrew tried getting in front of his mom, but Abel said if he didn't move he would shoot him too. Abel shot her in the back of the leg and then hovered over her, aiming straight at her head. He pulled the trigger multiple times, but the gun misfired. Realizing this, she ran and got into the car, and Andrew got in beside her. Just as she was about to pull out, blood splattered the windshield. Abel had shot her in the back of the head from behind the car. Thinking quickly, Andrew got into the driver's seat and brought her to the hospital. Noah calls Abel and he actually answers. He screams that Abel has killed his mother. Abel responds coldly that he knows, and that if he had known where Noah was, he would have killed him, too. The doctors are reluctant to help Noah's mom because she doesn't have insurance, so Noah pays for everything on his credit card. His mom doesn't die because somehow the bullet didn't do any real damage, and she's out of the hospital in only 4 days and back to work in 7. After Chapter 18, Noah gives an update on Abel. Apparently, after he shot Noah's mom, he grabbed Isaac and took off. He told him that he killed his mom because he's very sad, and he's going to die by suicide. He then dropped Isaac off with a friend and went around to friends and family to say his goodbyes. However, his cousin talks him out of dying by suicide, and he turns himself in. The case never went to trial, and he didn't serve a single day in prison. He kept joint custody of his sons. He's walking around Johannesburg today, completely free.